You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Suzy Krause.
Thanks for tuning into Author Stories. We've got a great show lined up for you today. Be sure to go to hankgarner.com and subscribe to the show. No matter how you listen, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Pandora, Spotify, or YouTube, you can subscribe to the show and never miss an episode. I'd like to thank some sponsors today. Scribophile is a respectful online writing workshop and writers community. Writers of all skill levels join to improve each other's work with thoughtful critiques and by sharing their writing experiences. We're the writing group to join if you want to find beta readers, get the best feedback around, learn how to get published, and be a part of the friendliest and most successful writing workshop online. Improve your writing by receiving detailed critiques. Learn from a vast collection of free writing resources. Make lifelong friends in our busy community of writers. Writing is a solitary art, but that doesn't mean you have to be lonely. Lucky for you, there are thousands of writers on Scribophile every day, and we're a really friendly bunch. You've never seen a writing group like this one? Join Scribophile today at scribophile.community. For the Words is a unique writing motivator unlike anything I've seen. For the Words is an online writing platform which motivates writers of all backgrounds to increase their word count through gamification. Writing can be challenging, especially when you need to consistently produce a high output of words. By injecting a little fun into the routine and using daily rewards to promote a healthy writing habit, For the Words makes it easier to reach that word count. We're a community of bloggers, professional authors, college and high school students, research scientists, gamers, and first-time writers from all over the world. Come for the words, stay for the fun. Go to 4, that's the number 4, thewords.com. Both Sides of the Law, the Casper Halliday NYPD series, Book 1 by Nathan Roden. He shared his father's dream of becoming a detective. A prison sentence was not part of his plan. Casper Halliday's dream began to unravel 2 months before his 16th birthday. His father, Bobby, resigned from the NYPD after 15 years without an explanation. Casper's parents fought. Sirens closed in on their home from every direction. The sound that had always been a source of comfort now brought only humiliation. Bobby Halliday moved out. Casper's dream dissolved into a daily fight for survival. All he wanted now was to finish high school so he could ease his mother's burden. On his 17th birthday, in the throes of depression, Casper made a bad decision. That decision brought him face to face with one of the most dangerous men in the city. In Casper's world, there is laughter and there are tears. There's light and there's bitter darkness. There are improbable friends and unspeakable enemies. The Casper Halliday NYPD series launches with the most unlikely of beginnings. Read Both Sides of the Law today. The ebook edition includes a sneak peek of Ghost Man, Book 2 in the series. Writers, the internet is one of the best tools for research and creativity. It can also be one of the biggest hindrances to productivity, distracting you from doing the seat in the chair, hand on keyboard work. Rescue Time gives you an accurate picture of how you spend your time to help you become more productive every single day. Spot inefficiencies in your day and become better at managing your time. Create a goal like spending less than 1 hour per day on email to help you stay focused. Set an alarm to tell you when you spent more than 2 hours on Facebook. Try Rescue Time and use our special discount code for 30% off a Rescue Time premium account by going to rescuetime.com/authorstories. Let us help you rescue your time. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today I'm really excited to have Suzy Krause on the show with me. She has a fantastic and a gorgeous new book, if I can say so, called Valencia and Valentine. And Suzy, I've had this book for a little while now, and it's one of those books that I just never want to put down. The characters just pulled me in, and I'd never wanted to leave them. So I guess that's one of the best compliments you can give.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. We begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Probably grade 1. Whenever you learn to write, that was when I wanted to tell stories with writing, I guess. I used to write stories about sad girls. It was always from its first, yeah, you're laughing because you read the book. I've always written stories about sad girls getting left out on the playground or having to move away from their friends, or every time I find an old notebook with stories that I wrote in it, it's always about a sad girl.
Oh man. Was that your experience, or did you move around a lot, or what do you think brought that on?
I lived in the same place from when I was born till when I was in grade 12. I think I just thought it was very dramatic. That was the most dramatic thing I could think of happening to someone, was having to move. Maybe, I don't know, but
I love that so much. You just were born with an overabundance of empathy, maybe.
Yeah, actually, maybe.
Maybe. That's so funny. Did you have a teacher or parent or anyone in your life that recognized that storytelling thing in you?
My high school teacher, Miss Wilson, was really. I was saying that to my mom the other day, that I don't think she liked me very much. I hope she doesn't listen to this. I don't think she liked me very much, but that made it more meaningful because she would read my stories out loud in front of the class a lot, and she would compliment me on them a lot. But it wasn't like I just like you, so I'm complimenting you. Her compliments meant so much to me because I didn't think she liked me.
Oh man, yeah, those are. We all love that encouragement. That sounds like hard-earned encouragement, but yeah, I could see that where that would be twice as potent, probably.
Yeah, it made me work hard for it, and then it just felt so good when I got it.
No doubt. When did you? Well, you said you started in grade 1 and telling your own stories about sad girls and all of that. Did that continue throughout school? And was there ever a lull where something else took priority over that?
Yeah, I probably wrote until grade 12, just kind of in English class and stuff like that. But then I graduated and I moved out and I got a job as a debt collector and didn't have time to write anymore. I wrote really, really crappy poetry for a while, and then also sad poetry. And then I started blogging for a long time. And so that became I just always wrote, but it was always different forms. And so blogging became the thing that I did for 10 years, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's well, you said that you wrote until you became a debt collector. That's I'm glad you brought that up because that's a pretty central theme in Valencia and Valentine. That has to be one of the most soul crushing jobs ever. What was your experience and how did you deal with that in the day-to-day life?
It was such a strange job. And the reason I got it, same reason as Valencia does in the book, is that you don't have to do an interview. You don't have to have any kind of experience with anything. They just will take anybody because nobody wants that job. And so it was just me and my friends all moved to the city and we all became debt collectors together because that was the easiest job to get and it paid really well because no one else wanted to do it. And and you got many death threats a day. I did. To the point where at the end of the day, we'd drive home, we carpooled, and we would just talk about our death threats and the creativity some people had in their,
yeah.
and they told you that they wanted to kill you. And, but then there was also some really funny calls in there too, and a lot of wrong numbers, and the work environment itself was very lax, and there was just a lot of really strange people that I worked with, and we would prank each other, and the managers were really funny. It was, so that was kind of how you dealt with getting death threats all the time, was just, it was kind of an environment that would make a really great sitcom, actually, I think.
A lot of writers have kind of dark, twisted senses of humor. And, when you spend a lot of your time alone and talking to make-believe characters and, there can be a little bit of gallows humor, hanging around. And it sounds like debt collecting is the ideal training ground for learning characters and just, getting some of the weirdest interactions that no one else will believe. I'll bet, as someone who had a mind toward writing, did you ever have one of those self-aware moments where you're like, oh, this is training ground for what I'm going to do later?
Well, I didn't at the time because I have always wanted to be an author, but it never occurred to me then that like this would be a good book. But then when I sat down to write this book, that was my starting point. It was like, oh, well, she has to be a debt collector because whatever this book is going to be, that there's so much potential there for anything really. But yeah, as I was in it, it was just kind of a like, me and my friends would swap stories about it, but I never even wrote about it while I was there.
That's so funny. That's so funny. Well, before we get too deep and how that crosses the bridge into Valencia and Valentine, I want to talk about blogging for a minute, and we'll come back to the book in just a second. I'm a huge fan and proponent of blogging. I love the idea of, in this world of social media, of firing off an opinion and then, and then everyone else weighing in and these kind of blown up arguments that come around it. There's something nice and thoughtful about blogging, about taking your time to express yourself and then, having a community that builds up around that. And I really am sad that social media is taking over so much and so many people that used to blog. And why did you start blogging, and what did you find was your, I don't want to say niche, but what your particular voice in that space?
Oh man, I started blogging because a friend of mine had a blog and she wanted me to blog with her because that was back in 2007 and it wasn't cool yet. It was like a thing that really nerdy or really emo kids did. So my friend had this blog and she was like, you should be a blogger with me and then we can read each other's blogs. And so we did that. And then I discovered the community that is on the internet. That was just so, I'm the same as you. I just am so sad that that's over because it was such a good community of just people who wrote because they loved writing. There was no money in it. There was no like fame. We all hid it from everyone in our real lives. I didn't even tell my boyfriend. It was like my secret blog where I commented on other internet strangers' blogs, but like it was just like this secret thing. And and it just, you kind of were able to explore your voice. I think that was so important when I actually started writing a book, is I had spent so many years kind of figuring out what my voice was and what I like to write, and just having kind of constructive but really friendly and good feedback from other people who like to write. I think I've strayed away from the question, but
no, that's what did you, what types of things did you write about? It started with you and your friend, and but what did you find was the topic or the themes that you kept coming back to over and over again?
At first it was just a place where I wrote about kind of daily life. At that point, I had quit working as a debt collector and I worked at customer service at Staples, which was almost worse.
Because you're supposed to plaster on a smile while you do it?
Yes. There was no like, it wasn't funny. It was just, people were horrible. It's a terrible, boring job. But, so I started writing about that and trying to find, I think that was, if you could say that it was a theme, it was just kind of writing about my boring life and my boring job and trying to kind of find the things underneath, like what things meant or what if that makes sense. Yeah,
for sure. It seems like the mundane things in life are where you find gold sometimes. It's just the fact that someone that we know or, pretend to know on the internet starts laying themselves bare is, it's kind of an empowering thing.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why I didn't write about debt collection when I was in it, because that was just too like,
It's too much.
here is the funny thing about this, or here is the horrible thing about being told someone wants to kill you. But Staples, it was just like, I had to dig.
So what brought around this desire to write fiction again?
Well, actually, it was a split-second decision almost. I was at a park with a girl that I didn't know very well, and we were talking, and I asked her, this was the first time we'd hung out, and I asked her what she did for fun, and she said that she had just started to write a book. And I was like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever. I have always wanted to write a book, and I've always wanted to be an author, and I just it was like I'd always wanted to go to the moon, and I met an astronaut. I was just like, you are the coolest person. And she was like, well, why don't you write a book? And I was like, well, 'cause I don't know. And then I went home that afternoon, and I put my kid to bed and for his nap, and I started writing this one. So,
well, isn't it wild that you could have this thing on the inside of you that you've carried your whole life, and it seems like this is it's just a distant thing. It's a thing that maybe one day I'll do, or maybe not. It's just this kind of unattainable thing at the moment. And all it takes is for someone to say, well, why aren't you doing it? And then all of a sudden the switch flips and you're like, well, I don't know. I'm going to go do it now,
Exactly. Right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so weird that it's almost like we just need to tell ourselves that we have permission to do it. It's not even, can you do it? We just need to be told that it can be done.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. So you start working on it that day during nap time, and does the story that that I'm holding in front of me now, is that what starts coming out, or are you just kind of playing with characters and what is the writing process like for you?
Yeah, I remember I just sat down and started writing. I just remember the first scene was just Valencia, but she was called Violet at that point. And she was just standing in her kitchen window watching this family across the street. And none of this is in the book now, but the family across the street had 7 kids, and they were just terrible kids, and they set a fire on their roof. And I don't know. I just was like, I'm just going to write this and see what happens. And so that kind of set the stage for a lonely woman who's kind of looking out at other things. And then I gave her the debt collection job. And so that scene got cut, and that house got cut, and the kids got cut, but just kind of that initial her standing in her apartment kind of watching life go on around her was kind of the basis of this book.
Please tell me that you have that other stuff somewhere, because I want to read that book about the kids that are setting their roof on fire.
I don't think I even do. I might have deleted it all. But
well, we saved it for posterity here when you want to go back to it. Yeah, that's right. Oh man! So, when you decided to bring the debt collector aspect into it, do you feel like that the story, because of that detail, do you feel like the story started evolving into what it was going to be?
Yeah, because so the debt collection thing, it was first of all just from personal experience. I wanted to write a book set there, but then I was thinking, so that I had this 34-year-old character who is at a debt collection place like that. And I just thought, I did that job when I was 19, and I lasted for half a year and did not want to work there ever again. But I just thought, so why would this woman who has been there for this long, she's 35 years old, why is she still there? And then I started thinking about how people with OCD, they often feel very... they have a sense of guilt and a feeling of needing to do something to assuage the guilt around a lot of things. And I thought maybe if my character has OCD, maybe the debt collection job is her, one of her compulsions almost. I don't know if this is making any sense, but she has this job that she feels the need to keep for this long. And she feels like she will just always work there because she's done something that she feels she needs to make up for. And so then that gave her backstory to me, and it just kind of all unraveled from there.
I'm glad you brought up OCD because that becomes a part of the book. Mm-hmm. I think OCD is probably one of the most misunderstood and most misused terms. in our language. You have some experience with this, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, my brain works like that.
Yeah. What do we misunderstand about it? And I know that, every time you walk past someone's desk and, one of their pencils gets moved and they straighten up their desk, we flippantly say things like, "Oh, you're so OCD." And, and we completely misuse that. And in misusing it, we steal some of the, I don't know if importance is the right word. We by miscategorizing it, we don't address it correctly, and we make it kind of stigmatized when we start talking about the reality of it. Can you clear up some of that for us and just tell us what your experience is, and then how does that start to play into the book?
Yeah. So OCD, like you said, people will say, "Oh, I don't like stuff crooked. I'm so OCD," which is not even grammatically correct because you're saying, "I am so obsessive compulsive disorder," which is just a stupid thing to say. But so OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. You have obsessions, you have compulsions that you feel you need to do to deal with the obsessions so that you can function as a human being. And it can get so overwhelming and so all-consuming that it can literally cripple people to the point where they can't function in real life. And so to flippantly say, "I just don't like it when something is crooked," it's like, no, you're picky or you're fastidious. That's not a disorder. It doesn't disrupt your life. It doesn't cause you to, like for example, Valencia in this book, she will be at work and she'll suddenly think like, "Oh, I've turned the stove on," and she will have to leave and go home to check. And so it would make it hard for someone who doesn't have a work environment like the one that I've put her in to hold a job, right? Or to have friends if you're constantly just in the back wondering if you're burning your house down or if you're, that kind of thing. So yeah, you're right. When we miscategorize OCD as this kind of like picky thing or like you count steps or whatever, you don't realize that there are people out there who are struggling with it, whose lives are hugely affected by it. And it's a mental illness that should be taken a lot more seriously than it is. And that's been an interesting thing, hearing some of the feedback from people as they read this book. And they say things like, "The character in this book, her OCD is way overblown. Like people don't act like that in real life, or this OCD is represented very extremely. It doesn't really seem like this is logical." But it's like people live like this. Like this is how people's brain works, and sometimes much, much worse.
Right.
So, yeah.
Exactly. We've talked a lot about Valencia so far, but who is Mrs. Valentine?
Trying to think of a non-spoiler.
She's in the title, so
she is, yeah. So she's like she seems at first to be the polar opposite of Valencia. She's an older woman who she has a hard time with life too, just like how Valencia has a hard time with life because of her mental illness. Mrs. Valentine has a hard time with life because she is just getting older and she has a lot of physical restraints on her and her constraints, and she is losing a lot of her friends to death and that kind of thing. But she has a lot in common with Valencia too, that you kind of see as the story goes on and their chapters alternate.
Now, because the book is about these two women, it's right there in the title. We suspect that their paths are going to cross, and something is going to be the catalyst for these two to have some sort of relationship. What is the thing that happens that brings Valencia into Mrs. Valentine's life?
Again, how much of a spoiler-free podcast is this going to be?
This is up to you. It's your book. I'll leave it to you.
Oh dear. Okay, because I don't want to ruin the book for people who haven't read it, but obviously Valencia basically becomes Mrs. Valentine. I feel like that's the short answer.
Yeah. The idea that Valencia becomes starts kind of morphing and growing. Did you know her trajectory from the beginning, that of how she was going to grow and what her goal was in the end?
No. At the beginning, when I started writing the 2 alternating chapters, in my mind, Valencia was the one who was struggling with her mental illness and her loneliness and her kind of her isolating herself from other people. And Mrs. Valentine was going to be this like really hopeful, triumphant, like she's overcome her things and she's like a better, more complete version of Valencia. But as I wrote them, I realized that like that's just not realistic. It's not even hopeful, because people who live with mental illness don't have that. That's not the goal, right? The goal is not to just not have mental illness, because that's not realistic. But their goal is to learn how to live well with it, and to learn how to cope with life despite that, right? And so Mrs. Valentine, in the end, she still has these struggles, and she still is consumed by a lot of things, and obviously is not completely well. But as she looks back on her life, even the parts that are hard, she's learned how to grow, and she's learned how to deal with things and to cope. And it's actually a much more hopeful ending, I think, than if she had just gotten better, as
Right.
I've been saying.
There are moments in the book where things can get pretty intense and pretty real. But you have this great way of bringing some levity and some lightness to the story from time to time to, I don't want to say make fun of, that's not the right word, but there's some things we see that can allow us to kind of laugh at ourselves just a little bit. And is that something that you did on purpose to kind of let the reader off the hook every now and then and just bring some funny moments?
Yeah, and I think this actually goes back to the whole conversation about blogging, is that that's part of what I've discovered in blogging, is that if you're writing about something really hard or really sad, but you kind of can make it, you kind of have to give your reader, right, some levity and some relief. But it also makes the darker things more, almost more intense or more meaningful, even if you have a variety of emotions and not just like beating your reader over the head with the sad thing.
The structure of the book is very simple, but it seems like it could be, for a writer, could be a complex thing to balance as you're going through it, to make sure that the alternating viewpoints are each doing their job and moving the story forward, and that one is informing the other, and it's a very careful balancing act when you're doing the dual narratives. Was that something that you were mindful of in the writing, and how much of that was planned out from the beginning?
I wrote it really carelessly, and then had to edit a lot.
I was hoping that was your answer, because that's exactly how I do it.
Yeah. And so I probably could have done it in an easier way. And so when I started writing my second book, I was like, I'm going to be so much better at planning and plotting and like taking care of myself. And I didn't. I don't know how to do that. So I guess this is my lot in life. I'm just going to be a sloppy first drafter and second through 10th drafter, and then maybe start to pull it all together on the 11th draft, which sucks.
Yeah. I have a friend, Josh Hayes, who is a relentless outliner, and we just had to come to the agreement one day that everyone outlines. It's just, I'm going to do it after I write the book, and he's going to do it beforehand. But everybody has a different way of doing it.
Yep.
You mentioned that you're working on another book now. This book is published by Lake Union. How did you get the book to them, and what's your publishing story?
So yeah, it's just Lake Union has the same kind of process as traditional publishers, where you get an agent and then they shop it out. And so my book was put out to quite a few publishers, and I chose Lake Union just after talking to the editor there, who had acquired or wanted to acquire my book, and she was just on the same page as me about it, basically. And I trusted her that she understood what I was trying to do, and she wasn't going to turn it into something else. And I feel like I've skipped most of the publishing story to getting to Lake Union, but yeah, it was very
Well, being that Lake Union is owned by Amazon, you get the benefit of their tremendous marketing department. And,
yeah.
And part of that is, the early releases to Prime members and things like that. And I know the book went out early to Prime members back in the spring. That's got to be exciting, knowing that the book is getting out there to readers and you're getting this kind of groundswell of buzz ahead of time.
Yeah, it was overwhelming, because I think I had my blog, for years, and I had like 20 faithful readers. And that felt like a lot to me, because I didn't know them in real life. So I was like, 20 strangers like to read my writing, and it's so cool. And then this Amazon First Reads thing happened, and all of a sudden a lot more than 20 people were reading. And it was terrifying. It was good. I think, like, in hindsight, I'm like, that was a good thing for my career. But at the time I was like, this is too many people reading my book.
I understand that. What are you working on now?
I'm working on another book. It's called, we changed the title. It's called Sorry I Missed You now. And it's about 3 women who kind of move into this rental house. They all have different suites in the rental house. And a letter comes one day, and it's kind of ambiguous who it's for, but it's from someone from somebody's past who wants to do some explaining and apologizing. And so they all think of a person that they think it's probably from, and they all think that it's for them. And then they all, as throughout the book, they try to figure out who wrote this letter, and try to get in touch with the people from the past who ghosted on them. It's kind of
a bit of a mystery.
A bit of a mystery. It's a little bit funny. There's some ghost parts in it, because it used to be called Ghosting Stories, because they all got ghosted on, and then the house ends up being haunted. But they changed
That's
the title.
Funny.
So.
When is it going to come out?
July 2020.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, when it does, please come back and let's talk about it.
I would love to. This was really fun.
Yeah. So the new book, Valencia and Valentine, is out everywhere now when people are hearing this. And Suzy, if people are just learning about you, is there a place where they can connect with you online and follow along with new news coming up and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I still have that blog. I don't write on
Awesome.
it very much, but I try to, because I believe that blogging will come back someday. But it's just suzykrause.com. And I'm on Instagram most of the time too, and that's just at Suzy Krause. And yeah, those are my 2 main places where I am on the internet.
Nice. Well, we're going to send everybody to see you and to pick up their copy of Valencia and Valentine. Suzy, it's been so much fun talking. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. This was really great.
Thanks for tuning in to the Author Stories podcast. Be sure to subscribe at hankgarner.com or on your favorite podcasting app. Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series.
The ancient building wore the severe cassock colors of a Puritan minister, a uniform monochrome of slate-gray shingles and soot-gray clapboards, its shadowed upper windows cross-hatched like the facets of a spider's eye. The second story protruded beyond the first and bore the house's only ornament, 2 gray teardrops of wood, weeping from each corner of the building's stiff upper lip. The place would have looked sinister and foreboding in its shadowed alley if not for the die-cut silhouette of a dancing sheep, jaunty above the door, and the 2 front bay windows that blazed with colorful, welcoming light. The windows were hung with orbs of colored glass on staggered lengths of ribbon. Each orb glowed with autumnal reds and delicate greens, burgundy tints and pumpkin hues, dappled raspberry and clover lime, streaked with light and weightless as bubbles over a cauldron. The shelves below offered crystal skulls and silver daggers and horny devils, Celtic chalices and woven dream catchers in dreamcoat hues. A primitive broom leaned in a corner, ready for flight, and a rhapsodic nude in bronze clutched her goat-legged lover beneath a jackal bust of Anubis. The interior of the shop was even witchier. Above a crude and sooty fireplace, a stack of brick barely holding the shape of a chimney pushed through the barn-high roof, threading ancient beams that crisscrossed overhead. Brooms and kettles and Christmas lights dangled from these, alongside Halloween costumes and Chinese umbrellas, pointy hats and bundles of herbs. Jason wandered deeper into the shop. His fingers trailed across strange bronze statuary and Aztec masks of turquoise and lapis lazuli. He rolled his eyes at the luck candles and money charms, but goggled indecently at a nude and anatomically correct silver nymph with long golden hair that reminded him of Kate. "See anything you like?" Jason jumped, turned, and jumped again. The woman standing before him was the living embodiment of every hippy-dippy counterculture type he'd ever seen. Her hair was green, her face pale and round, her doughy body wrapped in some elaborately woven ethnic garb. Her eyebrows were black and pierced in little rows, and her eyes were heavily circled with midnight blue, as if she'd been sucker punched by an oil slick. She tapped the glass over the nymph. "Admiring the goddess, I see." She'd practically caught him with porn. "You want to hold her? She won't break. Here." The woman flipped open a glass door and handed Jason the naked figure. "See how heavy she is? You could bang her against the wall all day and barely make a dent." She waggled her eyebrows, obviously enjoying his discomfort. He checked the price tag. $700? "The goddess is a symbol of love and fertility. Don't be ashamed of desiring her." The woman's long green fingernails plucked a long black cigarette from a long red case, and she lit it. "I sense," she blew smoke and studied its whorls, "dissatisfaction in love. Yes? I have just the thing." She pulled Jason into a side room where the smell of her clove smoke gave way to the skunky aromas of potpourri sachets, tea leaves, and hanging clutches of twiggy flowers. She searched, found a little bundle, and pressed it into his hand. "This will make you irresistible. Rub it on your nethers twice a day, and love shall surely find you." Jason made a face. The bundle smelled like cow manure. He didn't even want that on his hands.